those memories that I have still push me forward in this particular field.
Now, you said you had a purpose and the community took your purpose forward, right? If a professional is coming to you for an advice, a professional with a similar vision who wants to build a brand, what would you recommend them? Would you ask them to go for a full-fledged website and do paid ads, or would you ask them to focus on personal brand? How important is it for leaders to have a personal brand?
So that's an interesting question, Jimmy. Yeah, and that's one that I get often, and it's a question I do ask myself. In an ideal world, I'd like to have my own brand plus, a website for CDMA with a payment gateway, yes. Social media presence on relevant platform. The word relevant is key. Yes, I want to have that, but I told myself, hey, if I'm going to do social media for my brand, it has to be amazing. Right? And the next question I ask myself is, do I have the bandwidth? Yes, the mental bandwidth plus the time to invest your efforts in doing that. And the answer towards that was clearly no. I did not have that. Yeah, maybe I could. I had the time, but did I have the mental bandwidth? No, because the pandemic was around. The overall mood in society wasn't great. So I said, okay, instead of utilizing my energy on building a website and a payment gateway and social media, let me focus on my purpose. Let me focus on investing that time in helping my participants with their queries, with their interview preparation, with their CVs, right? And preparing for the initiative. And that paid off. Yeah. So to answer your question, if you are going to have a social media presence for a particular initiative or a company or a business, make sure it is relevant, make sure it is amazing. Yes. Another factor you've got to bear in mind is that it really helps having a personal brand, because humans like dealing directly with people, correct? So and if you're a person who's known for integrity, and if you're trusted, people will have more affinity towards the brand as well. Correct. That's how we humans are wired. If at a human level you're narrating the story of your brand, people will be happier to interact and engage with you. Okay? So do both, yes, but definitely have your personal brand. And if you're going to have a social presence, do it really, really well, because a half-baked social presence hurts brands, and a lot of brands do not realize that. So yeah, I took that call. Yes, I said I'll only have my presence because I did not have the time, nor do I have the mental balance.
How do organizations leverage stories? So to say, the business storytelling bit, if you can give your perspective on what to you is business storytelling.
It's a myth that children are the largest consumers of stories. They are not. As adults, we consume stories in the form of news, in the form of sports, in the form of judgments, in the form of political narrative, and in the form of business communication and advertising and PR and emails. We are the largest consumers of stories. But are those stories effective? Are those stories authentic? We consume hundreds of stories every day, but how many touch our heart and leave a mark? So I realized that while the human brain is a storytelling brain, and while we are the only species that has the ability to tell and consume stories, just because we are born with that ability doesn't make us good with it. Most of us are lucky to be born with 2 legs. That doesn't make us marathon runners. What marathon runners do is they exercise those muscles a lot more. Similarly, we may be born as human beings with the ability for narrative, but that doesn't necessarily make us good storytellers. It makes us storytellers, but doesn't necessarily make us good storytellers. And good storytelling requires that we engage, we exercise that muscle a lot more. And we engage with techniques and frameworks, and we reflect on our stories, and we work upon it. And then our stories can cut through the clutter and make a mark. A lot of our work today is with organizations like Google, Accenture, KPMG, Deloitte, JP Morgan, Reliance, Flipkart, Myntra, and a host of organizations like these, where we work with senior leaders and exercise their storytelling muscle. We literally take them into something like a story gym, where we push those muscles and give them frameworks and techniques so that they can tell a better story of the work they do, so that they can connect with people, so that they can inspire people, so that they can engage with them and they can influence action without having to necessarily use PowerPoint. To be able to make powerful points without PowerPoint. That's what stories do. And we work with startup founders, entrepreneurs. They have to raise funds. It's one of the most difficult things in the world to do, to tell a story and get someone to write a check. So you see the ROI on storytelling right away. Every leader, whether you are in the startup space, large organization, or social impact, you need to be able to tell a good story. And that's where we are.
The context defines everything. What context or what medium are you telling your story on defines the length of your story. Also, in a way, how engaging is your story defines how interesting your story is. The MarTech conversation that we were having, really, the MarTech conversation is taking marketing towards efficiency. In a way, it is about efficiency. How much CPM am I able to drive? What sort of completed views am I able to drive? But I think one thing we are really forgetting within the context of this conversation is that effectiveness matters as much as efficiency does. Effectiveness is about how effective is your ad, how relevant is it to your consumers, how well does it address their current needs and desires, how well does it break creative clutter, really, to be able to stand out and apart, especially when people are double screening, at times even triple screening. How well are you able to attract their attention by breaking the creative clutter?
Inclusion is about valuing people for their strengths or weaknesses. We-Storytellers provides a work environment where we can bring ourselves fully to work, our passion, promise, limitations, and dreams.
Freedom to make decisions, freedom to do things your way. We-Storytellers gives you the freedom to bring out the best in you. Freedom to work from anywhere? Well, that's just a cherry on top.
We-Storytellers for me stands for flexibility. The flexibility to work from wherever I choose to. My desk, favorite cafe, or lovely terrace. All I need is a laptop and internet connection to rock on.
We-Storytellers is all about ownership and accountability. We work on our flaws, we accept our mistakes, and we work on them to become the best version of ourselves. And how do we do that? Together.
Collaborating with the We-Storytellers is all about keeping your heart and your mind open, because that's how you tell great stories.
It is said that respect can neither be imposed nor begged for, that it is earned and offered. The ethos at We-Storytellers is woven with this yarn of respect.
We-Storytellers is a safe space for creativity to flow. No shackles, no bounds. It's a safe space to pour in all that you think and all that you imagine.
Like the Knights of the Round Table, all of us at We-Storytellers stand shoulder to shoulder as equals in our quest to fill the world with amazing stories.
Together we do so much, and we do it with passion. Nobody lets you fall, but if you do, they back you up. We-Storytellers is a no-nonsense, fun-loving and empathetic.
We-Storytellers is a dream that has turned into a vision, and a vision that is lived every day. Like every good story, we have a very strong message. We have diversity of characters, and our plot is just unfolding. Businesses coming to you and talking to you about this. How would you humanize their story? How would you build connections? How would you tell a business story?
No matter if the business that's talking to me is a unicorn, is a social venture, is an upcoming or startup, everything, the nut and bolts of that is that it has to interface with a human emotion. It has to have the story that organizations say has to touch that universe of universal emotion, and it is there. Sometimes we just think that if a code is being written or if there is a hardware, then it's not really you can't storyfy it in human terms. I don't believe that, because even any technology or even a product, so to speak, is actually meant to be there for human use. I'll give you an example. I was in Amsterdam, 2015 end, and it was for something which was to do with antibiotics. There is this whole group which by some divine serendipity, I was pulled in to anchor an international symposium for ethno-veterinary medicine to reduce usage of antibiotics. This was the seminar title, I remember. And I land up at this seminar and I see people from across the world, at least 7 countries for sure. And all of them are very serious veterinarians and, scientists and this thing. And every term in that was screaming biology or, in the life sciences space. And I'm just thinking to myself, saying that this is the first time I've come across this, and I found that there was a whole presentation on the 7th month pregnancy of a cow, and people are trying to, talk about antibiotics and life-saving medicines that can be given to this cow for easy. I'm like, this is a world totally different than mine, and I found myself taking furious notes. At the end of it, they really thought that I'm from the university myself. People were. And then this Dr. Katrine from the Netherlands, she said, "Where do you work, Vasanti? Are you from this space?" And I said, "I wish. The first time I'm hearing all these, but I'm fascinated." And ultimately, they took me to Amsterdam to anchor a worldwide this thing. And I took a session on storytelling. Coming back to your question, this is where it ties, saying there were all these people who were great at their work, who probably held patents for many of these discoveries, but could not tell their stories, or at least were struggling in that space. And all I did was I took up almost a 3-hour session at their behest. And I was trying to tell them that how do you simplify this? Because ultimately, even if you're talking about molecules, antibiotics, and so-called huge, Staphylococcus and all these life forms who are mysterious to us, what are they doing? But they are making sure that they are making the milk that we consume safe. They are making sure that if any of us or our dear ones is admitted to a hospital, they don't develop antibiotic resistance, because these antibiotics that they are trying to, which are really growing wild out of proportion because of reckless usage by humans. And there's this set of good people who are trying to say that, wait, there are ethno-veterinary drugs, or the moment you say ethno, it's ethnic, which is traditional wisdom, drugs from Ayurveda, Unani, and their own, across the West, even they have their own. There is something called Siddha deep in Tamil Nadu and the South. They are trying to digitize that medicines for human life and trying to say that do not use antibiotics so indiscriminately. So I'm saying that this is the foundation. This is the very basic. So if all of us, no matter which organization, what technology, what gizmos and devices, just see and, simpler, get to the very basic, this thing, do meditation if that's what takes you to. And the essence of it, why are you doing what you're doing? What is it that is going to make life better? By the work that you're doing. If you can figure out this as a single line, or even 2 lines. If you're finding it difficult, 3 lines, then you would have arrived at the story, or at least the core, the pearl जो CP में मोती जो है, उसके बाद how you want to do a podcast around it, you want to blog, you want to do a video story, you want to do a vlog, do it. But first dismantle and get to the simplest form, the heart of the story.
But you also mentioned about a phrase that you said, if you enjoy language, you'll like them. So the reason I pick up on that phrase is that language somehow in today's world, in the world when everyone is typing on WhatsApp, has become a casualty. I understand the youth, I understand the exuberance that they bring in, but in the kind of business that we are in, the business of communication, we see language being used very frivolously.
Yes.
Both by people who are in their communication between themselves, especially. And also when I've seen people writing to clients, people writing to pretty senior people, either in the organization or outside it, in a very casual,
Yes.
a typical WhatsApp language. Also the communication, brand communication, if you see, I am not trying to be Puritan and say you have to be a typical British English putting in, but the somewhere that respect for the person sitting on the other side is taking a back seat in the hurry of us trying to put something out. Do you feel that? Do you see that happening?
It's an evolution, Nidhi. So if you look at the evolution of English per se, then 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, you can see that there is a movement towards simplicity, towards a movement towards. So if you remember this language that was invented called Esperanto, which was meant to be a universal language, right? So their spellings are very, very different. I think the question is not about language as much as the other word that you used, which is respect. If there is no respect in the relationship, then now there could be 2 ways of looking at it. Either I have respect, but I'm not able to express it, and I actually don't have respect. These are 2 totally different situations that can occur, whether in business or in personal life. It's very difficult to get out of it. If you look at the statistics today in India on YouTube, not more than 6 to 7% of videos consumed are in English. Everything else in languages, in regional languages, right? And 90% of what is consumed online is videos. So you can see that each language brings its own culture, its own context. And therefore the question is about what you said. Am I being respectful in my relationship? So when I'm respectful in my relationship, I will be more careful about how I talk to people. So there is this lack of respect. So I'll tell you one. I remember somebody calling me up on a Sunday, for a job or whatever. So I said, not calling me, wrote an email to me saying, Miss Kiran, I want a job, etc., etc. So I said, since all of you are so much online, I would have expected you to at least Google and find out whether I'm man or woman. So she wrote back saying, who do you think you are? Piyush Pandey. So now this is a person who is looking for a job, and that's the relationship. I don't think it is to do with that error. There are others who have said, Miss Kiran, and then they say, I'm extremely sorry, I shouldn't have done this, etc. That's the nub, that's the crux of it, that I actually do not have respect for you, and therefore I tend to use language very frivolously.
So that means what you're saying is that the way we use language conveys our intent, our respect for the person on the other side.
So I could make an error in that language, but then if I'm respectful, I would turn around and say, okay, it's an error.
Therefore, the marketer is supposed to have instinct to know what's working and what might work. Is there a way to codify this instinct? Pass it on to Tomal?
Codify and pass it to a AI bot, you mean?
Not AI bot, maybe your juniors, your peers. build a team? In a team, how do you,
No, I mean, see, some parts of it, yes. Some parts of it, yes. Right. But if you really want to be a good marketer, right, you have to walk your way up, in the sense, literally walk, right? Track your way up. You need to be open to make mistakes, right? You need to have a very thick skin, right? You'll always have your CEO or questioning the things that you do because you cannot bring the right data point in front of him. It'll always be the case, right? You need to have thick skin from that perspective. Keep making mistakes and experiment, right? Keep learning from your own mistakes, and one day you'll realize, okay, I'm not being able to better my end result, right, with all these different tune-ups and tune-downs that I've done, right? And then you realize, okay, this is probably where the ceiling lies, and I've basically hit the best possible outcome. But until then, you have to keep hungry to make mistakes, right? And keep trying. If you don't have that in you, you're probably you probably are not going to do the best B2B marketplace.
That one is that you're writing to the audience, because this is the audience that would be consuming these stories. You are putting the story in the context because you're making them visualize how it would be, and you are giving them story wrapped in fun and humor and surprises and curiosity, something that will make them not just read but retain the story, as you said, right? So that's a very interesting angle to write, and taking that this whole storytelling to business. Now the business that you are in is talking to consumers directly, right? It's about costume jewelry, and it each piece, I'm sure, has a story. So as women, like when we go and buy a piece of jewelry, we just don't buy a red stone stud, right? We buy whether it is matching, it is having its aura. So there's a tale around it. So how do you, and apart from that, when you're taking the product to different countries, when you're building your marketing plans, when you're creating campaigns, how do you take business? How do you marry storytelling in business? There is an overlap, right?
We are the first people to create a brand in the field of costume jewelry. We started our brand in 1996, at which point, nobody was actually using costume jewelry. And the first time we went to, department stores like Ebony and Shoppers Stop and all, where we started having our kiosks and retail outlets, they were just, nakli jewelry, shadi mein, who will wear it? That whole concept was that who will wear fake jewelry? People could not access that jewelry because if it's only available in gold, how many sets can you afford to have? How many pieces of jewelry can an average person afford to have? But if you create costume jewelry, then you can access that beauty. You can access that design, you can access that piece of your heritage and your culture, and you can wear it. So that was also a focus area for us. So we looked for, we went through historical design books and Mughal designs and Kolhapur and Rajasthani, and every region has its own design. We tried to do collections in each of those regions, so that of that regional style, so that people can access it. And then, as you said, each one of those things comes with a story. So now that we sell, we are now digital first, and we basically sell directly online through Amazon and other mechanisms all over the world. We're probably selling in more than 100 countries right now. With each listing, you have the story. You have the story of the history of the piece. You have, quite often, if it is done by karigars in a particular area, then a story of those karigars and the artisans, and there sometimes we share techniques of manufacturing if it's a very handcrafted manufacturing, and that makes, I think, each piece special because it comes with all that. As I said, everything you look at has an aura around it. Comes with that.
What about your journey? If you can tell us some, I know there are a lot of confidential stuff that you will not tell us, and we won't ask you that, but some interesting anecdotes, some interesting stuff that you have done, because you have more than a decade of coaching experience, and you have been coaching people from different industries, different roles, and the change in the past 10 years, the whole landscape has completely changed. So in this changing environment, and therefore the kind of requirement or the kind of pull that they have towards coaching is also changing. So what have you seen as a change, and any anecdotes, anything that you can share with us?
Without getting into the specific details of the client, respecting their privacy and confidentiality, there are 2 or 3 themes that I can sort of share. One is about how we are brought up in our lives and what influence that has on us as we grow up and become adults, how functional, dysfunctional our behaviors become over a period of time, right? So it's important for the clients to become aware of where they've come from, what has shaped their values in life, what has shaped their behaviors, their thoughts, their sort of map of this world, how we look at the world is also shaped by how we've been brought up. So there was one particular client I worked with who had a very abusive relationship with the parent. The parent was an alcoholic, so they had trouble managing their behavior. And the child had learned to sort of respond to an aggressive, drunk parent by screaming. And every time the child would scream, the parent would back off. And this comes up in the conversation, right? I'm not figuring it out until I hear this from the client. Over the years, they made that their default behavior without realizing it. Anytime they feel threatened at the workplace, their default response seems to be to scream back, which is not serving them, because in a corporate workplace, we have to treat each other with respect and dignity. We can't be out of control. So the organization was aware of it. They realized how this was impacting the leader, because the leader was pretty successful otherwise, grown very well, pretty senior in the ranks, yet a lot of conflict. And only during the coaching conversations, because it was a safe space, we started exploring what's happening, what is the meaning they're associating with conflict, where does this come from? And the story goes all the way back to childhood. Now, this story is not shared by the client with colleagues, because it's hard for people to be vulnerable without the fear of being judged, right? So that holds them back from sharing. But it comes up in a coaching conversation. It could come up in a counseling or a therapy conversation, for that matter. I must mention at this point that, the idea of any coaching conversation is not to delve into the past. It is to know, where are you today? Where do you want to go? Only if the client wishes to speak about the past, he or she brings it up. We only look at it to learn something from it. The coach, as a coach, I'm not capable or certified or qualified to support anyone or heal or address their past. That's the zone of counselors and therapists. They're great at it. They're extremely talented. They're trained, they're educated in that space. So it's important for me to be mindful of that. Look at it, but not necessarily stay there in the past. Bring the client back to the present and say, where do you want to go from here? So you are aware, this is the behavior you demonstrate. How else could you look at conflict as you go forward? If you were not associated with your childhood with that particular behavior that you've repeated, how else could you respond? And a certain set of choices come up maybe. And the client then starts practicing those choices. It doesn't come easily, right? Years of conditioned ways of responding to be changed takes time. Then they start replacing these thoughts and behaviors over a period of time by taking more ownership for their behavior. 6 months or so later, I received an email from the client that they had won an award for being the most collaborative leader in that strategic business unit. A second story I can think of is another client who came from a very, very rough background from one of the remotest parts of the country. The parent had to sell off the land in order to educate the child. Only child in the family, first child in the family to be educated in all the generations. And today the client leads teams of about 2,000 people in a very large global IT organization. Hasn't been easy, right? There's a lot of stuff that they've gone through in order to get here. And because of that, there are certain challenges in the way they respond to the work environment, to the pressures, to their own dreams and aspirations. What do I deserve? Should I spend so much on myself? Should I get myself these things? Given where I've come from, my values about money are X, but I'm living a lifestyle which seemed to be not necessarily aligned to those values. So different conflicts for different people, right? But it's important to understand their stories. Where are they coming from? What has happened to make them who they are today? And that need not necessarily define them. What incredible things await them? What are their dreams and aspirations? Because the natural tendency for each one of us is to focus on our limitations. And the role of a coach is to keep bringing back the client to the possibilities that exist in front of you. And the more often the pendulum swings to the right, better will be the quality of choices and outcomes as they move forward.
Childhood is a pretty blurry thing because I don't remember much. But what I do remember is listening stories from my grandfather and eating off his plate of snacks. My mother would be shouting at me from behind him that don't steal his food, but I would be very much intent on polishing off the snacks that he has. And being a doting grandfather that he was, he used to always allow me. The best thing that I remember of his storytelling was the way he used to do the voice modulation and recreate sounds of animals. Or say when he was talking about mythological stories, then how the clash of battles used to happen, this and that. And my grandmother would be standing by the side and cheating him that, why are you telling the young boy this kind of stories? You can tell him about inspiring personalities from national as well as international status. But at that point of time, those sounds used to fascinate me so much that I would be bent on shushing her and shooing her away that you leave this place. I'm enjoying this to my heart feel. Don't bother me and grandfather right now. Or in Odia, we call grandfather as JJ. So don't bug us. At that point of time, I never ever thought that a time would come that storyteller would be a job title, so to speak, and a way of life. And for me, it was very fascinating when the first time I heard storyteller as a job title, I said, I really don't think these people know what they are doing. You can't tell a story and make a living. It was really great to start with We-Storytellers, because now that I understand how storytelling and the way my grandfather used to do storytelling have got their roots in the same manner, to catch hold of the attention, to understand what the person standing opposite you wants, and to mold the narrative in such a manner. I do feel that those memories that I have still push me forward in this particular field.